Hello everyone and welcome back to this channel. Today we will be discussing the Mv Hondius incident. The Mv Hondius is a state-of-the-art expedition vessel and was designed to take travelers to the most inaccessible reaches of the planet. But in the spring of 2026, it became the center of a medical mystery that highlighted just how thin the line is between a luxury adventure and a biological crisis. Over the course of 5 weeks, a cluster of hantavirus cases, specifically the Andes virus, turned this ship into a floating isolation zone. As of early May, the toll stands at 5 confirmed cases and 3 deaths, while public health authorities emphasize that the risk to general public is low. The incident has triggered international contact, tracing efforts spanning from the remote islands of the Atlantic to the suburbs of Arizona and Georgia. This isn't just a story of a localized outbreak. It's a look at how a rare pathogen, usually confined to rural wilderness, can hitch a ride on modern infrastructure. Wait, why does this even matter? Well, we are dealing with a virus that essentially turns the human body's own immune system against itself. It's a pathogen that has been studied for decades, yet our ability to predict its behavior is currently being hampered by significant shifts in global research funding. In this deep dive, we will trace the exact timeline of the voyage, explore the science of why humans are considered dead end hosts, and look at the research we lost just before this crisis hit. To understand the crisis on the Mv Hondius, we have to go back to the early 1950s. During the Korean War, more than 3,000 United Nations troops fell ill with a terrifying hemorrhagic fever. They suffered from internal bleeding, kidney failure, and shock. At the time, no one knew what it was. It wasn't until 1976 that the mystery was solved by South Korean virologist Dr. Ho-Wang Lee. Lee managed to isolate the virus from the lungs of a striped field mouse. He named it the Hantavirus, after the Hantan River that flowed through the region where the soldiers first fell ill. This gave rise to the genus name Hantavirus. For years, this was seen primarily as a renal disease, meaning it attacked the kidneys and was prevalent in Europe and Asia. This clinical presentation is known as hemorrhagic fever with renal syndrome, or HFRS. While deadly, with a mortality rate between 1% and 15%, it was strictly thought to be an Eastern Hemisphere problem. That perception changed in 1993. In the Four Corners region of the United States, a healthy young marathon runner died within hours of acute respiratory failure. Soon, other cases emerged. This wasn't attacking the kidneys, it was targeting the lungs. Researchers identified a new strain, the Sin Nombre virus, carried by the DA mouse. This marked the discovery of hantavirus pulmonary syndrome, or HPS. HPS is significantly more lethal than its renal counterpart. The mortality rate is a staggering 38%. It is a rapid aggressive assault on the respiratory system that essentially bypasses standard treatments. By understanding this history, we can see why the arrival of a hantavirus on a cruise ship, an environment of close proximity, immediately raised red flags at the highest levels of global health organizations. One of the most important concepts in understanding hantavirus is that humans are almost always what scientists call a dead-end host. In virology, a dead-end host is a species that can be infected by a virus but is generally unable to transmit that virus to others. The virus ends its journey with that host. This is because hantaviruses are specifically adapted to rodents. They move from mice or rats to humans through spillover, usually when we breathe in aerosolized particles of dried rodent urine, droppings, or saliva. Once inside a human, the virus finds it difficult to replicate in a way that allows it to exit and find a new person to infect. Now, you might be thinking, if it's a dead end, why is it so dangerous? The danger lies in how the virus interacts with our cells. It targets the endothelium, the thin layer of cells lining our blood vessels. Instead of killing these cells directly, the virus triggers a massive, dysregulated immune response. Your capillaries become leaky. Instead of holding blood, they begin to leak plasma. To understand it in simpler terms, it is the liquid part of your blood leaking directly into the air sacs of your lungs. This is why patients feel like they are drowning. Their lungs are literally filling with their own body fluids. This brings us to the difficulty of diagnosis, specifically the issue of viral load. The viral load is essentially the total amount of the virus present in a person's blood or tissues. In the early stages of a hantavirus infection, the viral load is often extremely low. It has not yet reached the threshold where the standard PCR tests can reliably detect it. This is why an asymptomatic person, like the travelers currently being monitored in Arizona, might test negative today, even if they are infected. It takes time for the virus to replicate to a detectable level. By the time the viral load is high enough to be caught by a lab, the patient is often already entering the critical leakage phase, where medical intervention becomes a race against time. Now, let's take a look. The timeline of the Mv Hondius outbreak is a case study in the stealth nature of this virus. On April 1, 2026, the ship departed from Ushuaia, Argentina for a multi-week expedition across the South Atlantic. On board were 147 people. We now believe patient 0, a 70-year-old man, and his wife had been exposed to the virus during a bird-watching trip in rural South America just before boarding. By April 6, patient 0 begins feeling ill with fever and diarrhea. At this point, no one suspected a rare virus. It looked like common travel fatigue or a stomach bug. On April 11, patient 0 died on board. Because he was elderly and the symptoms weren't yet classic for a respiratory outbreak, the death was initially attributed to natural causes. From April 13 till 15, the ship stopped at Tristan da Cunha, one of the most remote inhabited islands on Earth. Passengers went ashore unaware that the pathogen was already circulating. On April 24, the ship arrived at St. Helena. This was a major turning point. Patient Zero's body was removed from the ship. His wife, now the secondary patient, disembarks to begin her journey home. Several other passengers, including a resident of Switzerland and several Americans, also left the ship here. From April 25 to 26, the widow flew from St. Helena to Johannesburg, South Africa. During the flight, her condition worsens rapidly. She collapses at the airport and died in a Johannesburg hospital on April 26. By April 27, the ship reached Ascension Island. A British passenger is now showing severe signs of pneumonia and is medically evacuated to South Africa. At this point, the alarm is finally raised. On May 2, a third fatality occurred on board. A German woman who had been sick for 4 days with signs of respiratory distress succumbed to the infection. By May 4, results came back from South Africa. The British passenger tests were positive for the Andes virus. This was the smoking gun. Authorities realized they weren't dealing with natural causes. They were dealing with the hantavirus outbreak. From May 3rd till 6th, the ship is held off the coast of Praia, Cape Verde. Medical supplies are bought on board and the remaining people are placed under strict cabin isolation. By May 7, the ship resumed its journey towards Canary Islands. Meanwhile, in the US, the CDC and State Health Department began tracking the disembarked passengers from the April 24 stop at St. Helena. This includes monitoring residents in Arizona, Georgia, and California, who are currently checking them regularly, waiting out the remainder of that 8-week incubation window. The timing of this outbreak is particularly frustrating for the scientific community. In 2025, the National Institutes of Health terminated funding for several major research networks, including the Centers for Research in Emerging Infectious Diseases, or CREID. The CREID network was a global frontline defense designed to study viruses exactly like the Andes hantavirus before they reach a human population. However, last year, the funder issued a stop work order, describing the research as unsafe for Americans and not a good use of taxpayer funding. This erosion of safety parallels the April 2025 gutting of the CDC's vessel sanitation program, where all full-time staff were fired during a record year of 23 outbreaks. This left only 12 officers to manage a thinning safety net that has already seen at least 3 more outbreaks of various cases that have been reported so far this year. These decisions had a direct impact on our readiness for the Mv Hondius incident. Specifically, one of these centers had a pilot program based in Argentina, the very place patient 0 was believed to be infected. That $100,000 project was aimed at studying how the Andes virus moves from rodents to humans and developing faster, more mobile detection kits. The termination of these programs represents a shift from proactive surveillance to reactive crisis management. While the CREID network has already produced faster detection methods for diseases like dengue, the loss of this infrastructure means that when a rare virus like Andes hits a cruise ship, we are essentially starting our investigation from scratch. This brings us to the most technical and most debated aspect of this outbreak. As we discussed, hantaviruses in humans are generally dead-end infections. However, the Andes virus is the rare exception. Among all the studies conducted since the virus was first isolated, very few cases of human-to-human transmission have ever been recorded. It is an extremely rare biological event. In the 2018 avian outbreak in Argentina, researchers found that the virus could spread through close respiratory contact, but it required specific super spreader conditions. In the case of the Mv Hondius, authorities are still investigating whether the new cases were caused by passengers being exposed to the same environmental source in Argentina, or if rare human-to-human transmission occurred in close quarters of the ship. The WHO and CDC maintain that for general public, the risk of a chain reaction of infections is nearly zero. The virus simply isn't built to move through a human population the way a flu or a cold does. However, because the mortality rate is so high, health officials are taking no chances. This is why we see such intensive monitoring of the passengers in Georgia and Arizona. They aren't being monitored because they are walking biohazards, but because the window of time between the first fever and critical respiratory failure is so small that every hour of early detection counts. As we look towards the future, the Mv Hondius incident is a reminder that our health is intrinsically linked to the environment. Between now and the coming years, climate models suggest that the habitats of hantavirus-carrying rodents like the pygmy rice rat will shift. As rural areas in South America experience changes in rainfall and temperature, we may see more spillover events where humans and rodents cross paths in unexpected ways. Furthermore, as expedition tourism grows, more people will be traveling to the very remote areas where these viruses are endemic. Our current strategy relies on official statements and international cooperations. Official statements from the Arizona Department of Health Services and the California Department of Public Health remind us that while the situation on the ship was tragic, the local risk remains low. The individuals being monitored are currently in good health, and no community spread has been reported. The story of the Mv Hondius is one of biological outliers, from a virus that breaks the dead-end rule to a research infrastructure that was dismantled just when it was needed most. This outbreak serves as a sobering lesson in the importance of scientific foresight. We are living in an era where the most remote corners of the world are only a flight or a cruise away. This connectivity is a triumph of modern life, but it requires a matching commitment to global health surveillance. As the passengers from the Mv Hondius return to their homes and the investigation into the Andes virus continues, the focus remains on the data, understanding the viral load, respecting the incubation period, and maintaining the systems that allow us to see the invisible before it's too late. The South Atlantic Mystery may be reaching its conclusion as the ship nears port, but the broader challenge of emerging infectious diseases is only beginning. Stay vigilant.